My life in sunny Florida was shattered when my husband, David, a man I'd built a decade with, coldly stated our young daughter needed her real father to step up, forcing me to confront a deep, terrifying secret from my past. Humiliated and desperate to protect my child, I took a lucrative job offer in Japan, making the move an agonizing act of strategic exile. While abroad, I unearthed his elaborate deception, a years-long betrayal, and a lie that ran deeper than I could have imagined, transforming my heartbreak into a calculated strategy for vengeance. The path to justice was paved with silent surveillance and emotional warfare, culminating in a final, irreversible reversal that revealed the true meaning of family and shattered his life of arrogance. The Florida sun has a way of bleaching everything out, making all the colors too bright, too simple. I used to love it. Now, I see it as just a blinding lie. My name is Clara, and for 10 years, I lived in a beautiful, air-conditioned cage built by my husband, David. He was the classic American success story: sharp suit, firm handshake, a smile that could sell snow to an Eskimo. And I was the anchor, the devoted wife, the one who held the blueprint for the perfect life. Our daughter, 6-year-old Lily, was the centerpiece of that perfect life. She had my eyes, David's stubborn streak, and a laugh that sounded like 1,000 tiny bells. She was the reason I woke up, the reason I fought off the shadows that sometimes crept in from the past. I thought David knew everything about me. I thought the love we shared had cauterized all my old wounds. But secrets, they don't decay. They just wait for the perfect moment to claw their way out. And for me, that moment arrived on a Tuesday, right after Lily's third-grade parent-teacher conference. We were sitting in the kitchen. David was scrolling through his phone, a habit that had become a wall between us. I was just talking about Lily's science project. I remember the smell of the faint chlorine from his morning swim. Everything felt routine, safe. She's struggling with the solar system, David. Maybe you could spend some extra time with her this weekend? I asked, my voice light. He didn't look up. He just let out a dry, humorless chuckle. Clara, he said, I just don't think she's a math and science kid. She's different. The word hit me like a physical blow. I put down my coffee mug. The silence in the kitchen was sudden and deafening. He finally raised his eyes, and the look in them wasn't cold. It was surgically precise. What do you mean, different? I asked, my blood turning to ice water. I mean, the effort is pointless, he stated, leaning back, the picture of casual cruelty. She's sweet, yes. But she needs guidance that I can't provide. She needs her real father, Clara. The one who has that gene. He said it so easily. So casually. The secret I thought I'd buried 1,000 miles deep, the one David had promised he understood and accepted, was now his weapon. He was demanding I bring a ghost into my daughter's life to solve a homework problem. It wasn't about math. It was about power. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't scream. It whispers the exact truth you've been running from. And in that moment, I wanted to scream, to shatter the perfectly polished veneer of our kitchen. But I couldn't. I just felt the crushing weight of my failure as a protector. Do you ever feel that sudden, paralyzing fear? The one where you realize your entire world is built on a fault line and you can't move. That fear is what paralyzes people. It's why they watch but never act. If you're one of those people, too scared to take the next step, just scroll on by. But if you know what it feels like to be fighting a silent war for your future, don't just watch my story. Subscribe now. Don't let me fight this alone. I looked at him. My husband. My betrayer. David, we had an agreement. That was in the past. The past has consequences, Clara. I'm tired of paying for yours. He stood up, towering over me. Find him. Tell him. Or I will. He walked out, leaving me alone with the sickening realization. This wasn't a request. It was an eviction notice from my own life. I had to leave. Not to find him, but to protect Lily from David's poison. A week later, I had secured an international transfer to the Tokyo office. The lie I told David was that the money was too good to pass up. The truth? I was running to something, not from something. I was running to a dark, quiet place where I could breathe, think, and plot. My hands were shaking as I booked the flight. I knew the journey to Japan wasn't just a physical move. It was the first step in a strategy that would either save my daughter or destroy us all. But what David didn't know was that I wasn't just planning to leave. I was planning to watch. The flight felt like 1,000 years, 14 hours of pure, agonizing silence, punctuated only by the low hum of the engines. Every mile that separated me from David was a drop of poison leaving my system, but it was also a shield I was raising for Lily. I kept her close the entire time, her head resting on my shoulder. She thought it was an adventure. I knew it was a war. My mind was a coiled spring. David's arrogance was astonishing. He truly believed I was the passive wife, the one who would crack under pressure and obediently summon my ex. He believed he held all the cards. He was wrong. While he was busy perfecting his golf swing and his casual cruelty, I was finalizing my escape route, and more importantly, setting the trap. Days before I left, I'd installed a low-profile security camera in David's private home office, disguised as a dust filter. I'd also switched out his ancient, cracked phone for a new one loaded with proprietary, mirrored software. He'd barely noticed. He just saw the new model. I saw my eye in the sky. The first few weeks in Tokyo were a blur of jet lag and cheap, temporary housing. I focused on Lily. New school, new friends, new routine. I had to look like the heartbroken wife trying to make a fresh start. And I sold it well. Daily calls to David, tearful goodnights, feigned loneliness. The performance was exhausting, but it bought me time. The hardest part was holding back. The urge to lash out, to call him a hypocrite, to burn the whole thing down was a constant ache. But revenge is a dish best served on a different continent, through a fiber optic cable. I needed information. I needed proof, not just of the coldness but of the reason for the coldness. That night, alone after Lily was asleep, I logged into the feed for the first time. My hands were shaking, not with fear, but with a terrible, desperate hope that I was wrong, that his comment was just a momentary lapse of decency. A tired, angry outburst. The office was dark. David walked in. He wasn't alone. A woman, blonde, expensive suit, a laugh that was too loud for the silence of the suburban night. I recognized her immediately. Cassandra. The new managing partner at his firm. The one he'd dismissed as a competent but boring colleague. They weren't discussing the merger. They were holding hands. Then, David spoke, his voice low, but clear through the tiny microphone. She's gone, Cassie. Out of the country. Japan. The house is ours. The child is no longer an issue. He said the child like she was a stain on the carpet. But it was the next sentence, spoken with a cruel, smug satisfaction, that brought me to my knees. We've been planning this for 2 years. Our betrayal is finally complete. 2 years. It wasn't about my past. It was about their future. His demand that I find Lily's real father was a theatrical, desperate move to push me out and claim everything. My heartbreak instantly calcified into something hard and cold. I wiped the tears away. The game was over. The war had begun. And I had just given David exactly what he wanted, distance. A distance that would allow me to destroy him without him ever hearing my footsteps. The cruelty wasn't in the infidelity itself. It was in the performance. 2 years. 2 years of David watching me. Letting me believe our decade of life together, our daughter, our vows, meant something. 2 years of him planning my emotional and geographic exile, just to get a bigger house and a better career with his mistress. They didn't just break my trust. They weaponized my past. He didn't want the real father to step up. He just wanted me to step out. I remember sitting there in the sterile silence of that tiny Tokyo apartment, the neon city lights bleeding through the curtains. I wasn't weeping. I was hollow, like someone had reached inside and carefully removed every vital organ. All those years I'd spent trying to be enough, trying to compensate for a single mistake I made before David was even in the picture, and all he saw was a leverage point. I picked up the new phone I'd given him, the one mirroring his movements. I needed more than just a video. I needed the blueprint of their 2-year betrayal, and I found it almost immediately, buried deep in a cloud folder he thought was secured. It wasn't just about their affair. It was about our finances. David was planning a scorched earth divorce strategy. While I was in Tokyo, thinking I was safe, he was systematically restructuring our assets. He'd moved the lion's share of our cash into an offshore trust in his sister's name, a trust he believed I couldn't touch. He'd meticulously logged every complaint, every argument, every minor instability, preparing a case to paint me as the unfit mother who abandoned her family for a career overseas. I will leverage the prior child history to demonstrate instability and unfit environment. Her absence in Japan is critical. Read one email to his lawyer. He wasn't just taking my money, he was trying to take my daughter. That was the line. The line I drew in blood. My grief evaporated, replaced by a searing, focused heat. He saw a ghost from my past and used it to try and steal my future. But David made one fatal, arrogant mistake. He thought he was the only one playing chess. He didn't know I was already 5 moves ahead. He didn't know that my lawyer, the brilliant but notoriously discreet Miss Kawahara, was already on retainer. He didn't know I hadn't just fled to Japan. I had secured a high-level corporate transfer that came with a 6-figure non-disclosure agreement and total operational control of the office budget. My first strategic move needed to be silent, untouchable, and irreversible. It needed to show him I wasn't just hurt, I was dangerous. And it revolved around the one thing David worshipped more than Cassandra: his image and his legacy at the firm. I opened a secured terminal and began drafting the first communication. To the global board of directors. It wasn't about the affair that was a messy personal issue. It was about something far more valuable in the corporate world: fiduciary duty. David had been using company resources, specifically a non-monetary asset I discovered through the mirrored phone, to finance his personal schemes with Cassandra. I hit send. The email was brief, impeccably researched, and devastating. It didn't accuse David of cheating. It accused him of corporate espionage and fraud. The consequence wasn't a messy divorce. It was the total implosion of his career. I leaned back, breathing deeply, the tension finally easing, replaced by a terrible, quiet satisfaction. I knew the moment that email landed in the CEO's inbox in New York, the seismic waves would begin. He thought he had exiled me across the world. I had just unleashed a silent bomb directly under his corner office. How long until he realizes he's already lost everything? The air in the apartment felt cleaner after I sent that email. Not because the betrayal was gone, but because the inertia was broken. David had dictated the terms of the breakup: shame, exile, and abandonment. I had just rewritten the first clause: consequences. I didn't sleep that night. I just watched the clock, the 9-hour time difference stretching like a rubber band between us. In New York, it was early morning. In Florida, David was just pouring his first cup of coffee, completely unaware that his perfect corporate life was about to become collateral damage. I finally got a signal, not from the security camera, but from David's mirrored professional email, a sudden flurry of internal communications. Urgent messages from the CEO's executive assistant, a cancelled board meeting. The subject lines were coded, but the urgency was palpable. The bomb had landed. The phone rang 2 minutes later. It was David. "Clara. What in God's name did you do?" His voice was frantic, stripped bare of all his practiced arrogance. He sounded like a cornered animal. I let the silence hang there, heavy and thick, stretching across the Pacific. "I'm sorry, David. I'm not sure what you're referring to. Is everything all right at work?" My voice was a soft, smooth lie. The sound of a dedicated, slightly naive wife checking in. "Don't play dumb. The email. The one about the trust funds and the company credit line, they're launching an internal investigation. They just suspended my access. This is you, Clara. This is retaliation." "Retaliation? For what, David?" I asked. My voice barely above a whisper. "For suggesting our daughter needs her real father because you're tired of paying for my past? For moving millions of our joint assets into a ghost trust?" I didn't retaliate. I merely reported the movement of corporate funds. "You were sloppy, David. That's not my fault." He fell silent. Then a new, cold fury replaced the panic. "You think you've won? The bank accounts are frozen, Clara. All of them. And that salary of yours. It's going straight into a custodial account until the divorce settles. You have a job in Tokyo, but you don't have access to a single dollar for Lily's care. I may be suspended, but you just stranded yourself on the other side of the world without cash flow. I still control the financial leash." He was right. In my haste to strike the first blow, I had overlooked the fine print. I had money coming in from my job, but it was days away, and the immediate, shared accounts were locked down. For the first time since I'd left, a cold, hard knot of fear tightened in my stomach. Not for me, but for Lily. I was playing a power game with a child as the central piece. "You wouldn't," I choked out. Watch me, Clara. You started this war. I'm finishing it. I'm filing the emergency custody papers this afternoon, citing abandonment and financial instability. I want Lily back here by the end of the week. He hung up, leaving me with the dial tone and the crushing realization that he wasn't just cruel, he was a master strategist in his own right. My victory had been instantaneous, but my setback was devastating and immediate. I immediately called Miss Kawahara. She listened calmly as I recounted David's legal threat and the financial lockdown. He thinks financial control is the endgame, Miss Kawahara. He's trying to starve me out. He is playing American law, Clara. Custody favors the parent who can demonstrate stability and financial security. But you are playing international law and the law of evidence, she responded, her voice a soothing balm of competence. You have proof of his corporate misconduct and his intent to abandon you and the child. We use his panic against him. We didn't need money. We needed information. David had tried to bury his secrets in a foreign trust, but he'd forgotten that money always leaves a trail. Miss Kawahara's next instruction was precise. Find his other accounts, Clara. The ones he used before the trust. He will have used one of them to pay his current mistress. Follow the transactions. They will reveal more than just an affair. They will reveal why he truly needed you gone. I was broke, afraid, and 9 time zones away from my enemy. But now I knew exactly where to look. What terrible, deeper secret was he hiding that required him to destroy not just our marriage but his entire career? David's threat to use my history against me was a calculated bomb. His financial lockdown was the shrapnel. But panic is a terrible investigator. David, for all his corporate ruthlessness, was fundamentally predictable. He thought in terms of large, visible assets. I needed to look for the tiny, insignificant transactions, the ones he forgot to erase. I spent the next 72 hours submerged in data. Miss Kawahara had secured temporary access to his old personal bank records, the ones from before the offshore trust was established. It was a digital archaeological dig. Thousands of lines of transactions, gym memberships, gas, dry cleaning, gifts for Lily, normalcy. But then I started cross-referencing Cassandra's known expenses, her apartment address, her frequent travel destinations. I was looking for patterns, for anomalies that linked his money directly to her life in a way that couldn't be explained as a business expense. And there it was. Not a large transfer. Not a wire. Just a series of monthly automatic payments, always on the 14th, totaling a modest amount, deposited into a little-known municipal credit union in a neighboring state. It was a burner account, designed to be too small to flag IRS attention, but large enough to cover the hidden costs of a long-term mistress, designer clothes, a discreet weekend rental, the kind of things David couldn't expense or pay for with cash without suspicion. I tracked the recipient account holder's name, K.D. Miller. Not Cassandra. But the address linked to the account was the same luxury complex where Cassandra lived. Why use an alias? Why the extra layer of complexity for a simple affair? I ran the name K.D. Miller. Nothing corporate, nothing legal, just a ghost in the system. Then, I widened the search to include David's personal calendar and his encrypted communications from 2 years prior to the start of their betrayal. I found a string of emails exchanged between David and a medical firm specializing in fertility treatments. The truth hit me with the velocity of a train. David and Cassandra weren't just plotting a life together. They were plotting a family. The K.D. Miller account wasn't for Cassandra's rent. It was for a specific, ongoing payment, fertility clinic storage fees. The emails confirmed it. David wasn't just tired of my past. He needed me gone so he could replace me not just as his wife but as the mother of his future child. My own infertility issues after Lily's birth were a private grief David and I had shared. He had held me, promising Lily was enough, that she was our miracle. Lies. Every comforting word, every gentle touch, was a lie designed to keep me compliant while he schemed to create a pure replacement heir with his corporate partner. He had used my deepest pain to fuel his arrogance. This was not revenge. This was survival. This information changed everything. David's case against me was built on me being an unstable mother. My counter-argument needed to be built on him being a calculated manipulator who sought to defraud his wife and abandon his child to pursue a wife replacement family, utilizing corporate funds to do so. I immediately forwarded the evidence, the burner account, the fertility clinic correspondence, the company credit card slips used for consultations to Miss Kawahara. Her response was immediate and chillingly professional. Excellent, Clara. This moves us from a messy divorce to a clear case of malicious intent and financial fraud. We can proceed with the next phase now. He wants Lily back by the end of the week, citing instability. We respond by exposing his deepest secret to the one person whose opinion he cares about more than his own mother's, the CEO. I smiled, a thin, sharp, terrible smile. David thought he could use my past to steal my child, but I had just found the key to unlock his most guarded secret and leverage it for justice. How far will a desperate man go when the life he's been planning for 2 years is about to be utterly exposed to the corporate world he idolizes? David's attempt to financially strangle me was short-lived. Miss Kawahara had a temporary solution, a professional hardship loan backed by my new company, ensuring Lily and I were secure while the accounts remained frozen. It wasn't the satisfaction of spending David's money, but it was the quiet resilience he hadn't planned for. He expected panic. He got professionalism. My focus shifted entirely to the custody hearing he was desperately trying to schedule. He needed to prove abandonment. I needed to prove malice. We didn't file motions in Florida. That was David's territory. Instead, Miss Kawahara filed a petition for an international protective order in a jurisdiction with favorable reciprocal agreements, detailing David's fraud, the existence of the burner account for fertility treatments, and his intentional manipulation to force my exile. The legal maneuver was brilliant because it sidestepped the divorce court entirely. It positioned David as a threat, not a wronged husband. I logged into the mirrored phone one evening and checked David's recent activity. He was emailing his lawyer constantly, his messages riddled with capital letters and exclamation points. He was spiraling. Then, I saw a new contact in his recent calls, Lily's school principal. He was escalating the psychological warfare. He wasn't just filing papers. He was attempting to involve third parties to tarnish my reputation with Lily's support system. I called the principal immediately. This is Clara, Lily's mother. I understand David reached out to you regarding Lily's custody situation. My voice was steady, projecting calm authority. The principal hesitated. Yes, Mrs. David. He expressed concern about Lily being suddenly pulled from her environment. He mentioned instability. I understand completely, I smoothly interjected. David is under immense stress. He's currently on forced leave from his firm due to an ongoing internal investigation concerning financial misconduct. I just wanted to assure you, Miss Smith, that Lily is safe, thriving in her new international school, and I have full legal guardianship. David's concerns stem purely from his current professional difficulties. I had neutralized his attempt to poison the well. I didn't lie. I just reframed the narrative. The principal's silence on the other end of the line before she confirmed her understanding was the sweetest music. David's reputation was his armor. I had just shown I could poke holes in it with a simple phone call. David, realizing his attempts to contact the school and freeze the money weren't working, grew desperate. He started trying to contact me multiple times a day, not through the phone, but through encrypted messaging apps I had set up for official correspondence. I ignored them all, letting his panic fester. Then came the second small victory. Miss Kawahara informed me that the filing of the International Protective Order had accomplished its goal. The emergency custody hearing he scheduled for tomorrow? It's been delayed indefinitely, Clara, she stated. The court is now demanding full disclosure of his employment status and the outcome of his firm's internal investigation before they will hear a custody case. We bought ourselves 3 months of peace. 3 months. 3 months for the investigation I triggered to run its course. 3 months for David's financial fraud to be laid bare. 3 months to find the absolute, unassailable evidence that connected Cassandra to the corporate asset David had misused. I knew David wouldn't just sit and wait. A cornered animal doesn't retreat. It attacks the closest, most familiar thing. And the most familiar thing was the ghost from my past, the real father he was so determined to bring into Lily's life. I looked at the surveillance feed. David was alone now, slumped in his leather chair. He was reaching for his private laptop, the one he never used for work. I knew what he was doing. He was tracking down him. The man I swore I'd never see again. The man who had no idea he had a daughter. I hadn't just given David the distance he wanted. I had given him the rope to hang himself. By forcing him to find the real father, He was about to set in motion a chain of events far more chaotic and damaging than anything I could have planned myself. Was he about to unleash a past I couldn't control? Or was he unknowingly walking straight into the most painful, unexpected betrayal of his own life? I couldn't look away from the screen. David was hunched over his private laptop, his face illuminated by the cold blue light. He was tracking down him. Ethan. The one man from my past David was never supposed to mention, the man whose shadow I thought I had banished with my wedding vows. I watched David send a series of cryptic, anonymous messages. He wasn't inviting Ethan into Lily's life. He was attempting to bribe him. David's plan was simple. He needed someone with my DNA, someone with my history, to appear unstable and willing to fight for custody. Then he could swoop in as the stable father figure, winning Lily and the house in one clean move. He thought he was hiring an accomplice for an insurance policy. But as I watched, David scrolled through an old folder on his desktop, searching for something to send Ethan as proof of Lily's existence. He finally located a handful of pictures from Lily's third birthday party. He paused on one specific photo. It was Lily, beaming, holding a teddy bear. And then David did something inexplicable. He zoomed in on the date stamp in the corner of the picture. He studied it, not with love but with chilling intensity. Then he opened a digital lockbox and pulled out a single, ancient, laminated document. My hospital discharge papers from Lily's birth. My blood ran cold. Why would he have those? I had kept them locked away in a safe deposit box. David had never even seen them. I watched, my heart hammering against my ribs, as he meticulously compared the discharge date on the official paperwork with the date he thought Lily was born, the date we celebrated every year. They were different. Lily wasn't born when David and I started dating. She was born 3 weeks later. I had lied about the timeline. Not just to David but to everyone. I had shaved 3 weeks off the truth of Lily's conception to make sure the math worked, to make sure David, my stable, safe David, could never connect Lily back to the turbulent time when I knew Ethan. But David didn't just discover my secret in that moment. He knew. He didn't stumble upon the paperwork today. He had pulled those discharge papers years ago. He knew the truth about Lily's biological paternity before he even married me. He knew I had lied, and he had accepted the lie, letting me think I was safe, letting me build a life with him only to weaponize that exact single lie a decade later when it was convenient for his corporate affair with Cassandra. The cruelty wasn't that he cheated. The cruelty was that he had married me on a foundation of calculated leverage. Our marriage wasn't love. It was a contract of conditional silence, and he was tired of honoring his end. Every kind word, every anniversary toast, every tender moment was a performance, a manipulation to ensure my dependence, so that when he finally decided to leave, he could press the nuclear button of my past and walk away clean. I had loved him. I had trusted him. And for 10 years he had been waiting in the dark, holding the single piece of evidence that could destroy my daughter's sense of self and my legal rights as a mother. I finally understood the real reason for the offshore trust and the fertility clinic. He wasn't just replacing me. He was erasing me and everything I represented. I stood up from my desk in Tokyo, the city lights cold and indifferent. I wasn't heartbroken anymore. I was a geological force. I called Miss Kawahara. The target has shifted, I said, my voice steady, ice cold. I need to prepare a counterfiling that addresses not infidelity but intentional, decade-long emotional fraud and extortion based on the timeline of Lily's birth. I have the evidence. We aren't just fighting him for the house. We are fighting him for every lie he ever told me. The legal war had just become a personal annihilation. David thought he held the secret that gave him victory. But now that I knew he knew, I was free to unleash every single piece of evidence I had collected, targeting his finances, his career, and his deepest desire for a new, clean family. The realization that David knew about the timeline lie for 10 years didn't break me. It tempered me. It turned the soft metal of my grief into hardened steel. If our entire marriage was a strategic game to him, then I would finish the match. Miss Kawahara listened to my revelation about the birth dates and David's calculated leverage without a hint of surprise. She was a lawyer, trained to see malice, not love. This changes the trajectory entirely, Clara. His case for custody was weak. Now it's criminal. We are no longer simply fighting a divorce. We are fighting a long-con extortion case. Our strategy now had 3 simultaneous phases: corporate annihilation, Accelerate the investigation into the misused company credit line. This must be a formal, external complaint, not just internal, to guarantee his termination and legal liability. Emotional exposure. Use the evidence of the fertility treatments and the timed lie to counter his abandonment claims. We would file an injunction to prove he intended to replace Lily and me, making his custody claim an act of malice aforethought, not parental concern. Financial trap. David's suspension means he will soon be bleeding money. He will try to access the offshore trust in his sister's name. We needed to anticipate this move and ensure that the moment he tries to pull that cash, he triggers a tax penalty so severe it wipes out the principal. We dedicated the next few hours to Phase 3. The offshore trust was complex, designed to hide assets. But David had overlooked one crucial detail when he moved the money: a specific regulatory clause that penalized early withdrawal or restructuring if the original source of the funds was flagged for corporate fraud. Ms. Kawahara's tax law specialist identified the exact loophole. He can access the money, Clara, Kawahara explained. But when he does, the penalty will be approximately $850,000. He will only have one option: to sell off the largest remaining asset he has under his personal name to cover the immediate tax debt. And I knew exactly what that asset was: his pristine, expensive, sun-drenched Florida house, the one I had just abandoned. He thought he was coming home to an empty palace with Cassandra. Soon, that palace would become his most urgent liability. The thought gave me a cold, powerful satisfaction. The key was the timing. We had to wait for the internal investigation at his firm to confirm the fraud before triggering the tax trap. We needed the official hammer to fall. Watching him scramble was cathartic. He looked exhausted, defeated, yet still arrogant enough to believe he could talk his way out of it. He kept calling Cassandra, but his voice was strained, no longer the confident lover. He was an employer trying to manage a crisis. "You need to stay calm, Cassandra. The suspension is temporary. We just need to wait for Clara to break. She has no resources." But David didn't see the silent, relentless pressure building around him. I hadn't broken. I had just gotten colder. I contacted the authorities in the US and provided the evidence of David's corporate misconduct not just to his firm, but to the regulatory bodies. This ensured the investigation wouldn't be buried internally to protect the firm's image. My intention was clear: total, public exposure. My final move of this phase was the most daring. I prepared a detailed, anonymous report, including photos of David and Cassandra, the burner account details, and the fertility clinic correspondence. I addressed it to the executive vice president of his firm, a man known for his rigid moral conservatism, who was also David's chief rival for the next promotion. I wasn't sending it to destroy David's career. I was sending it to guarantee his humiliation. The package was mailed with express delivery. I knew the moment that report landed on the desk of David's rival, the formal, measured corporate investigation would turn into a personal, vicious execution. David thought he was fighting a grieving wife. He was about to realize he was fighting the entire system he built his life upon. What was the one thing he didn't realize I knew? The one piece of leverage that would make his rival push him completely out of the company. I expected the fallout from the EVP package to be immediate. A public firing, perhaps an escort out of the building. The kind of visible, satisfying humiliation David deserved. But the clock kept ticking. The EVP didn't respond. David's mirrored email remained quiet. The corporate hammer, which should have fallen with brutal finality, was simply hanging in the air. "Patience, Clara," Miss Kawahara advised. "These things move slowly when the money is big. They are mitigating risk." But something felt wrong. David was too quiet. A trapped animal doesn't go silent. It screams. I checked the security feed. David wasn't pacing. He was sitting calmly at his desk, having a quiet dinner, a prepared meal with Cassandra. They were relaxed, almost celebratory. I zoomed in on the surveillance feed. Cassandra was showing David something on her phone. He leaned in, smiled, and then they raised their wine glasses in a silent toast. David's lips moved. I used the forensic audio enhancement Kawahara's team had provided. The sound was faint but clear. Cheers to the cease and desist. And to her stupidity. I scrambled back to the mirrored email feed. Buried beneath his junk mail, a new document had been filed, an emergency, preemptive injunction against me, filed anonymously through a shell company lawyer. David hadn't just been waiting. He had been planning. He knew I had planted the surveillance. Not because he saw the camera, but because he was tracking my movements through a second, older phone I had forgotten to wipe, which I had once used as a dedicated alarm clock in his office. It had only been on Wi-Fi, but that was enough. The injunction cited harassment, stalking, and unauthorized surveillance used to disrupt professional life and demanded the immediate cessation of all monitoring and the destruction of all evidence collected via said methods. The move was brilliant. And devastating. He didn't expose my espionage publicly. He simply had it legally neutered. My surveillance footage, the proof of his 2-year affair, the evidence of his conversations with Cassandra, the audio of him discussing his planned replacement family was now legally inadmissible in a U.S. court. He hadn't been targeting my finances or my career. He had been targeting my evidence trail. He wasn't just a cheater. He was a strategic predator who could anticipate my every move. I had fallen into the classic trap, arrogance of the hunter. I thought I had him trapped, but he had just burned my bridge of retreat. I immediately called Miss Kawahara. "Clara, this is bad," she confirmed, her tone grave. "His lawyer is good. This injunction doesn't expose him to the public, but it ties our hands completely. If we use the surveillance data, we risk being held in contempt of court and losing any custody leverage we have." But David's victory was only partial. His move was purely defensive, designed to protect his image and his evidence. "He can stop the surveillance, Kawahara, but he can't stop the IRS," I asserted, finding my cold core again. "He can stop the video, but he can't unfile the paperwork I sent to the regulatory bodies. He just spent a small fortune on defense when he should have been securing his assets." The loss of the video footage was a major setback, but it forced us to rely on the one thing David couldn't hide: the money trail. I immediately issued a new instruction to Miss Kawahara's team. "I want the tax trigger activated immediately. I don't care about the corporate investigation anymore. I want to see how he reacts when he loses the one thing he always valued more than me, more than Lily, and even more than Cassandra's affection: the house." The plan was now brutally simple: bypass the court, bypass the company, and hit him directly in his home and his wallet. How quickly could I dismantle David's sense of security before he used his newfound legal shield to fully execute his original custody threat against Lily? The moment the cease and desist hit, David felt safe enough to move. He was bleeding legal fees and had no income. He needed access to the offshore trust he'd stashed his stolen wealth in. He thought his preemptive injunction had won him the high ground. He was about to learn it had simply made him predictable. I had given Miss Kawahara the green light: activate the trap. The process was swift and silent. We didn't need to alert David. The IRS and the regulatory bodies did that for us. By moving a large portion of the sequestered funds, David triggered the corporate fraud-related penalty clause we had identified. The amount was just shy of $1 million, the kind of sudden, unexpected debt that destroys confidence, even for a high-earning executive. David's phone, which I was still mirroring, exploded with automated bank alerts and urgent calls from his accountant. The panic on the screen was visceral, replacing the calm arrogance I'd witnessed earlier. I logged into the surveillance feed. David was alone, leaning against his kitchen counter, reading something on his iPad. He wasn't yelling, he was just quiet. And then he dropped the iPad. It clattered to the marble floor. The camera couldn't capture the sound, but the body language was deafening. He knew. He ran his hands over his face, a gesture of pure, unadulterated defeat. He wasn't just broke, he was in debt. And the only way out was to liquidate. The house, his symbol of success, the backdrop to his betrayal, was now a millstone around his neck. I knew he would try to hide the liquidation from me. He would attempt a private sale to a friend to maintain his facade of control. But I had prepared for that, too. I had a separate team file a precautionary lien on the property, citing the original, undisputed half of the marital assets that he had attempted to hide. It wasn't designed to stop the sale. It was designed to ensure that the sale had to be public, transparent, and legally ratified through my appointed agent. David had to use a specific, discreet real estate agent who was now legally bound to inform my lawyers of any offer and close. The house was his to sell, but the terms were mine to dictate. Small victory, too, financial control confirmed. Cassandra arrived a short while later. She looked immaculate, dressed for an evening out. She walked in, chirpy, oblivious to the financial earthquake that had just hit. "Ready, David?" The team is waiting at the club to celebrate your little legal victory. David didn't look up. He just pointed a shaking finger at the scattered papers on the floor. There's nothing to celebrate, Cassie. Clara didn't break. She just broke us. We lost the money. The trust is gone. We have 90 days to sell the house or the bank seizes it. Cassandra's expression curdled, not into sympathy but into cold, hard calculation. She picked up a foreclosure notice, her perfect facade crumbling. Sell the house? David, our future is tied to this house. We were going to raise our child here. There is no our child right now, Cassandra. And there is no our future if we're homeless and in debt. David's voice finally rose, hitting a peak of desperate rage. Cassandra did not comfort him. She didn't offer support. She took 2 steps back. This is your mess, David. Your exile plan failed. I'm not losing my standing at the firm because your ex-wife is a lunatic with surveillance equipment and tax lawyers. I watched them fight, 2 predators turning on each other under pressure. This wasn't love. This was a partnership predicated on wealth and convenience. Cassandra's immediate abandonment, her fear of being tainted by David's failure, was the first dose of true karma. I smiled, closing the laptop. The financial execution was complete. Now, it was time for the emotional confrontation. I needed David to understand exactly who destroyed him. I booked a flight back to Florida. Not to hide but to face him. I knew he would be alone, vulnerable and consumed by the betrayal of both his wife and his mistress. He thought I was permanently exiled. He was wrong. I was flying back to Florida not to reclaim the house, but to deliver the final, devastating truth to him in person. Would he crack under the pressure, or would he unleash the final, desperate secret he was holding back about Ethan? I landed back in Florida under the cover of a late-season storm. The air was thick, heavy, and pregnant with the promised downpour, a perfect setting for a final confrontation. I didn't drive to the house. I drove to the local park where David and I used to take Lily every Sunday. It was neutral ground, public, and impossible for him to control. I sent him a single untraceable text message. The park, 6 p.m. Come alone. I have your paperwork. He was there waiting, leaning against the oak tree where we carved our initials years ago. He looked terrible. His suit was rumpled, his hair unkempt, and the arrogance had been entirely replaced by a bitter, hollow resentment. He looked at me, not with shock but with pure, venomous hatred. You think you're clever, Clara? Flying in here, playing the spy? You think destroying my career and my liquidity is a victory? It's going to make the divorce cleaner for me. I don't owe you anything now. I didn't react to his rage. I held up a single, large manila envelope containing the full summary of the financial penalties, the lien on the house, and the corporate fraud charges I had initiated. You owe me the truth, David. Not a strategic lie about Lily. Not an eviction notice disguised as a moral crisis. You owe me the truth about why you decided to destroy a decade of my life. He scoffed. It was never a life, Clara. It was a compromise. I tolerated your secret, Ethan, for 10 years. I tolerated your past. And I was tired of it. I wanted a clean slate. I wanted a future that wasn't built on your shame. I stepped closer, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You didn't tolerate my secret, David. You weaponized it. I know you knew the truth about Lily's birth date before we were married. You kept my lie, my vulnerability in a digital lockbox for 10 years, waiting for the perfect moment to use it to extort me out of my home and my child. His face went white. The color drained away, leaving only the fear I had worked so hard to extract. How do you? The security camera was the distraction, David. The second phone was the mistake. You thought the injunction was your shield. But when you move millions of dollars and pay for fertility treatments with corporate funds, you leave a trail that no injunction can erase. I didn't need the video of you and Cassandra. I needed your balance sheets. The house is going into a forced sale, David. The trust is gone to tax penalties, and your beloved Cassandra? She's not here. She saw the foreclosure notice and ran, because she was never interested in you. She was interested in the perfect life you promised her. And I took the perfection away. I let the silence hang there, watching the sheer magnitude of his betrayal, his 10-year-long con collapse into ruin around him. And the lie about Lily? That she needed her real father. That was your biggest mistake, I continued. My voice suddenly laced with genuine, deep sorrow. You didn't see me as her mother. You saw me as an obstacle. Lily is the daughter of a woman who flew 9,000 miles and risked everything, not for revenge, but for her survival. You are the father who traded her for an executive bonus and a new mistress. I dropped the envelope at his feet. It landed with a soft final thud. This is the last piece of paperwork you will ever receive from me. I am not fighting for alimony, David. I am not fighting for the house. I am fighting for the custody of a child I raised with love, against a man who used her as a bargaining chip for a promotion. I turned to walk away. Wait, Clara, he yelled. His voice was raw, broken. What about Ethan? What about his claim? I found him. He's going to fight you for her. I gave him a look of profound pity and utter finality. David, you spent 10 years trying to use a man who doesn't even know Lily exists. You were so blinded by your own need for control, you missed the biggest truth of all. There is no real father, David. There is only a biological donor, and he's not fighting for anything. I already spoke to Ethan 2 days ago, and he signed all parental rights away. You just wasted 2 years of your life plotting to threaten me with a ghost I had already vanquished. I walked away, leaving him alone in the growing storm, surrounded by the remnants of his financial and emotional ruin. What legal complication could David possibly pull from the wreckage now, having lost his money, his mistress, and his final, most powerful threat? The flight back to Tokyo felt different. The first time, I was running into the unknown. This time, I was flying away from a scorched earth. David was ruined, financially, professionally, and his leverage Ethan had been systematically neutralized. I had won the battle. I thought I had won the war. But David had been a corporate lawyer for 15 years. Even ruined, he had institutional knowledge of how to inflict maximum administrative pain. My phone rang as I was crossing the international date line. It was Miss Kawahara, her tone clipped and unusually severe. Clara, David filed a massive complication this morning, a lease pendants against the Florida house. I stopped pacing the aisle of the plane. A what? He's in debt, Kawahara. He needs to sell that house. A lis pendens is a formal notice of a pending lawsuit, specifically against the property itself. He's claiming that due to the complexity of the marital fraud case, the sale of the house must be halted entirely until a judge can rule on the exact apportionment of assets, including his claimed emotional distress damages. It was a brilliant, despicable move. He didn't want the house. He wanted to ensure that I couldn't get the money from the sale, thereby forcing us both to continue paying the mortgage and mounting legal fees until the slow-moving American court system sorted it out. He was intentionally creating a financial stalemate, a legal anchor dragging us both down. The victory in the park suddenly felt hollow. David wasn't fighting to win. He was fighting to make sure I couldn't win peacefully. He was willing to destroy his own credit and take on massive debt just to spite me. This wasn't about love, hate, or even money. It was about control and denying me closure. Lily was safe, yes. But this tactic meant the legal fight would drag on for months, maybe a year. It meant Miss Kawahara's fees would continue to mount, and my funds, while stable, would be constantly depleted. I felt a surge of cold fury. He was using the very system he corrupted to continue his campaign of terror. But the fury quickly turned into a quiet determination. I wasn't fighting David the lover anymore. I was fighting David the legal obstructionist. And legal obstructionists have paper trails. Kawahara, we can't fight this head-on in family court. It will take too long, I stated. We need to expose his motive for the lis pendens. Why is he willing to take on this debt? Because he has nothing left to lose, Clara. No, I countered. Because he has one last, tiny, desperate secret he's protecting. David is a creature of comfort. He has to be living somewhere. He can't afford a hotel indefinitely. Find where he is sleeping. My surveillance had been rendered useless, but David's arrogance had blind spots. He would never think I would look in the obvious, non-digital places. I initiated a query through Kawahara's team to check the public records for recent, unusual utility hookups or short-term leases in David's name or Cassandra's name or even a third party's. The search was expensive and time-consuming, but the answer came back quickly from the local utilities. A power meter had been activated 3 days ago in an upscale but discreet beachside condo 30 miles from the Florida house. The account was in the name of a distant, elderly cousin of Cassandra's, a cousin David had dismissed years ago as a small-time failure. I immediately searched Cassandra's private mirrored email from the period before the injunction for the cousin's name. I found one email. It wasn't about the condo. It was a cryptic note from Cassandra to David. Did he ever get the paperwork for the boat? The boat. David had sold his small sailboat years ago, citing lack of time. Why would Cassandra mention a boat? And why was he hiding in a cousin's condo? The Lis Pendens was the distraction. The hidden asset was the key. What was David hiding that was more valuable and more incriminating than the house itself, forcing him to risk massive debt and legal entanglement just to buy himself time? The boat. The cousin's condo. The aggressive Lis Pendens to halt the sale of the house. David wasn't just trying to make my life miserable, he was buying time to move something physical. And that something was tied to the corporate fraud I had reported. I instructed a discreet, private investigator, a former colleague of Miss Kawahara's, to look into the beachside condo and the nearby marina. We were looking for a boat under Cassandra's cousin's name, or any shell corporation David had used. Within 24 hours, the investigator reported back. A large, expensive sailboat far too luxurious for the cousin was docked under the name Lily's Legacy, LLC. David had registered a shell company using Lily's name, the cruel irony not lost on me. But the boat itself wasn't the secret. The cargo was. The investigator secured a discreet, time-stamped photo of the boat's main cabin. It was cluttered with large, heavy-duty Pelican cases, the kind used for sensitive, expensive electronics or documents. My mind raced. Corporate fraud, suspended access, urgent Lis Pendens. Why risk everything for a few boxes? I cross-referenced the boat's location and registration with the original corporate fraud report I had filed with David's firm. The fraud was related to the misdirection of funds for a high-value, proprietary server infrastructure project that was supposed to have been installed at the New York headquarters. The equipment had vanished weeks before my departure. The realization struck me with the force of an actual electric current. David hadn't just misused company funds for his affair. He had orchestrated a massive heist. The server infrastructure he had billed the company for hadn't been installed in New York. It was being stored in Pelican cases on a boat registered in Florida. David and Cassandra had planned to steal the proprietary hardware worth millions, containing crucial company algorithms, sell it to a competitor, and use the offshore trust money and the new boat to disappear and start their clean slate life. The truth wasn't that David wanted a new wife and a new baby. The truth was that he was a thief planning an escape, and I, along with Lily, were simply obstacles to be eliminated before the final move. The Lis Pendens wasn't about spite. It was about ensuring the house wasn't seized before he could retrieve the boat and its priceless cargo. He couldn't risk the boat being found if the authorities searched the house after a forced sale. He hadn't just lied to me, he had committed a federal offense. This was the unassailable leverage I needed. Not just financial fraud, but corporate espionage and grand larceny. My fight was no longer a messy divorce, it was a righteous intervention against a criminal. I immediately contacted Miss Kawahara. We changed the plan. We do not use the legal system first. We use the authorities. We prepared an anonymous package, detailing the Lis Pendens, the sale delay, the boat's location, the boat's name, and the specific proprietary equipment that was missing from the New York project. We sent it not to the police but directly to the Federal Bureau of Investigation FBI field office in Miami, citing wire fraud and corporate theft across state lines. This was the final, irreversible action. Once the FBI was involved, the game was out of my hands. It was the only way to bypass David's legal maneuverings and guarantee the immediate collapse of his entire world, preventing him from escaping with the loot. I sat back, watching the clock tick down to the delivery time of the package. I felt no remorse. David had forced me to choose between my daughter's safety and his freedom. I chose Lily every time. I received a final, frantic text from David on the shared emergency contact line, minutes before the FBI would move in. Clara, I know you're involved. If you care about Lily, don't take the final step. I have a final piece of evidence about Ethan that proves you are the danger. Call me now or I release it all. He thought he still had a card to play. He was bluffing with a dead hand. But what if the final piece of evidence wasn't a bluff? What if, in my vengeance, I had overlooked a critical fact about Ethan that could still compromise Lily's future? David's final text message was the scream of a drowning man. A desperate, empty threat about Ethan. I didn't even read the full text. I deleted the message immediately. I had already dealt with Ethan. He was a ghost. And David had no more power over the living. I was done playing his game of secrets and leverage. I placed a final, definitive call to the FBI contact established by Miss Kawahara. The target is the sailboat, Lily's legacy. The cargo is proprietary server hardware. The subjects are David and Cassandra, currently hiding in a beachside condo 30 miles away. You have a narrow window before they move the boat. I watched the news feed online, an hour after the call. It wasn't the sensationalized media I was hoping for, but the quiet, official reports. FBI executes search warrant at local marina, seizing high-value electronic equipment in connection with corporate fraud investigation. 2 individuals detained. It was over. No explosions, no confrontations. Just the cold, impersonal machinery of justice moving into place. David and Cassandra had traded their perfect suburban life for a pair of handcuffs, all because David couldn't handle the truth of my past or accept the love for the child we had. Miss Kawahara called, relief evident in her voice. They found the equipment, Clara. It confirms the massive fraud. David and Miss Cassandra are in custody, facing multiple felony counts. The lis pendens on the house is being immediately discharged due to the criminal nature of the assets involved. The house is clear for sale. I closed my eyes. The war I had fought for months, across 9 time zones, had ended in a single, decisive strike. I had my financial freedom and, more importantly, I had secured Lily's legal future, free from David's poison. I felt an overwhelming sense of vindication but not glee. Just peace. I hadn't destroyed David for the sake of destruction. I had systematically dismantled a criminal threat against my family. He was a liar, a thief, and a blackmailer. The real victory wasn't seeing him arrested. It was realizing that I was capable of protecting Lily against a threat that had threatened to consume me. The next day, David's divorce lawyer called. The man sounded defeated. Mrs. David, your husband has instructed me to offer you the following: full custody of Lily, unconditional, and immediate liquidation of the marital assets, split 50/50. He only asks for one thing in return: that you do not appear at his preliminary hearing and that you withdraw the initial corporate fraud report you filed. I smiled, a thin, sharp satisfaction. He was begging. He thought he could barter his freedom with the house money. Tell him I accept the custody and the asset split, I told the lawyer. But tell him this: I will not withdraw the corporate fraud report, because it's the truth. And tell him that the money is irrelevant. I only want one asset from the marriage, one thing that truly belongs to me. And what is that, Mrs. David? The house. Tell him I'm buying him out for half the market value. I want the house liquidated to me so that I can decide what to do with the physical manifestation of his betrayal. The lawyer was stunned into silence. He hadn't expected me to want the tainted symbol of David's lies. But I did. I needed to stand in that kitchen, the place where he delivered his venomous ultimatum, and reclaim it for Lily. The divorce would be finalized in weeks. The house would be mine. David was facing years of legal battles and prison time. The justice was complete, proportional, and irreversible. I finally allowed myself to think about Lily. She was coming back to Florida, but to a house that was no longer a cage of lies but a fortress of truth. The last remaining ghost was the memory of David himself, and the moral of this terrible journey. But what would I tell Lily about her father? And how could I explain the true meaning of family without exposing her to the trauma of David's final, devastating betrayal? The legal papers were signed. David remained in custody. His lawyers focused solely on mitigation, not malice. The lis pendens was gone. The house was mine. I flew back to Florida with Lily, and we drove to the house together, not as escapees but as owners. Lily ran through the empty rooms, the sound of her laughter bouncing off the walls. She saw an adventure. I saw a battleground. For the first few days, I did nothing but cleanse. I hired a crew to rip out the carpet David walked on, change the locks, and repaint the walls in a bright, neutral color that symbolized a true fresh start. I sat in the silent kitchen, the spot where he had delivered his brutal ultimatum, and I felt nothing but a quiet, enduring strength. David had used this house as a stage for his lies. He hosted parties here with Cassandra, planned his escape here, and used it as collateral for his criminal enterprise. Now, the house would be a symbol of my resilience. I went through David's remaining personal effects. boxes of old papers, golf trophies, and an absurd collection of expensive watches. I kept nothing. I donated everything, except for one item, a small, personalized photo frame on his nightstand. It held a picture of him and me, taken on our honeymoon, both of us laughing, genuinely happy. I picked it up, expecting to feel rage or pain. Instead, I felt a detached sadness. He wasn't always a monster, I whispered to the empty room. He was a weak man who prioritized appearance over truth. The true betrayal wasn't the affair or the money. It was the opportunity cost. I spent 10 years believing in a stable, loving partner, ignoring the red flags and carrying the burden of my past, only to find that my partner was the one preparing the guillotine. The moral wasn't about revenge. It was about self-worth. David's entire scheme, the demand for the real father, the fertility treatments, the corporate theft, was all driven by a desperate need to control the narrative of his own life, to erase any imperfection. He had to destroy me to create his illusion of perfection. Lily was the anchor that saved me from drowning in the bitterness of revenge. My strategy wasn't to destroy David. It was to remove the threat he posed to her future. I realized I didn't need a man to validate my motherhood or my value. I had faced a sophisticated criminal and dismantled his entire life, not with emotional chaos but with cold, calculated intelligence. I was enough. The last legal detail involved the final message from David's lawyer regarding the final piece of evidence about Ethan. Miss Kawahara's team confirmed it was a sham, a folder containing a few old, grainy photos of Ethan, labeled with paranoid speculation about his current criminal tendencies. David was merely trying to spook me one last time. I instructed Kawahara to release the photos and his speculative notes to the FBI. Not for prosecution, but to show his persistent, malicious attempts at character assassination, ensuring he had zero credibility in any future proceedings. I finally had to address the biggest question. What about Lily? David was gone, but the name David was still her father's. I had kept the knowledge of Ethan hidden for a decade to protect her. Now I realized the biggest threat wasn't David's lie, but my silence. I sat Lily down on the porch swing, the Florida sun warm on our faces. Lily, honey, we have a new home now, a new life, and I have to tell you something important about Daddy David. She looked up at me, her face full of the uncomplicated love and trust I had fought so hard to protect. I realized I couldn't tell her the truth of corporate fraud and betrayal yet. She was too young. I had to give her a truth she could live with, a truth that centered on love, not malice. How do you explain the concept of a father disappearing forever without shattering a child's faith in the world? I looked at Lily, searching for the simplest, most honest foundation to build our future upon. The truth of David's crimes belonged to the adults, not to her childhood. Lily, you know how sometimes people are broken inside? I began, my voice soft. Daddy David, he was very, very broken. He loved money and being important more than he loved the truth, and he made some very big, bad mistakes that hurt a lot of people. Lily frowned, processing this. Is that why he's not coming back to live with us? Yes, honey. He made choices that mean he can't live here and be safe with us anymore. But I want you to remember this. A daddy isn't a person who just shares DNA. A daddy is a person who protects you and tells you the truth. I took a deep breath. I protected you, Lily. I fought the brokenness and the bad choices, and I won. We are safe, we are strong, and we are together. That's what family is. It's a promise, and I never break my promises. I had found the true moral buried beneath the rubble of revenge. The true real father was the protector, the consistent love, the one who fought for the child, and in this case, that role was mine. The betrayal hadn't broken our family. It had merely exposed the non-family member, allowing the true foundation Lily and me to solidify. The house was sold within 2 months, and I used the proceeds to invest in a smaller, cozier house near the beach and established a secure college fund for Lily. I kept my job in Tokyo, managing the department remotely for half the year, a new arrangement born of Miss Kawahara's shrewd negotiation, giving me financial independence and flexibility. David was convicted. Cassandra pleaded guilty to lesser charges and received probation. Their calculated, 2-year scheme had led to less than 6 months of stolen time and a lifetime of consequences. Karma, I learned, wasn't a sudden bolt of lightning. It was a slow, systematic dismantling of everything built on a lie. The path of vengeance is brutal. It strips away your empathy and leaves you operating on pure, cold logic. But sometimes when betrayal is that deep, when the threat to your child is that existential, you have to become the villain in someone else's story to save your own. I wasn't proud of the darkness I had embraced, but I was eternally grateful for the strength it revealed. I had been afraid of David's power. I had become something infinitely more powerful, the truth. You've seen what David did. You've seen how he manipulated my life for 10 years, holding a secret over my head, plotting my financial and emotional ruin. You saw the terror when I realized I was fighting a monster smarter than I thought. If you felt that fear, that crushing, paralyzing realization that the person closest to you is secretly a weapon, you know what it's like to fight a war alone. I fought David's silence with my strategy, and I won. But millions of people watch stories like mine and do nothing. They wait for the perfect moment to act, and that moment never comes. Don't be one of them. Subscribe to this channel now. Don't scroll away and leave me as just another forgotten story of heartbreak. If you're too scared to subscribe, you owe it to me, to the fight I just won, to enter the comment section right now and lament about why you won't subscribe. Tell me what fear is holding you back. Show me that I'm not just talking to ghosts. I looked at Lily, truly looked at her. Her happiness was the true resolution. David thought the greatest asset he could steal was money or a boat. He was wrong. The greatest asset was the quiet peace of knowing you are safe. That peace is what I bought back.